Emma, thank you so much for joining us on the Hurt Healing podcast. It's a real joy to have you here today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Can you exercise too much?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
What is too much?
I think if you're feeling too weak, if you're not healing properly between workouts and you're in pain, and I think if you're also using it as a way of avoiding other things in your life, then all those things become a problem.
So how would you define exercise addiction, and when does it become an addiction?
That's really tricky, isn't it? Because it's not like an addiction like to nicotine or alcohol where you can say this is a like chemical reliance on something. And I think there are so many things that we talk about as being addictions, like being addicted to our phones or whatever, that I think it can be quite difficult to pinpoint. But I would say the addiction part is where you kind of can't leave it alone. You know, you can't say, well, just today I'll take a rest day, or today I can't do it because I'm busy, so that doesn't matter. It's that kind of feeling of, if I have to get up early for something, rather than nowadays I would just get up early and think, there's no time for their workout, so that's fine. Whereas in the past I would have got up extra early to make sure the workout was done first. And it's that, isn't it? It's trying to be able to live your life.
What are the signs that someone is over-exercising mentally and physically?
I guess extreme anxiety when they can't exercise. And for me it was definitely that I was injured and kind of refusing to acknowledge it. So physically it was quite obvious. And in fact, I remember I row a lot. I have a rowing machine at home and I row a lot. And my husband was talking about the fact I had a really painful shoulder, and he was like, I'm really worried you might have to go to the doctor, and you might have to talk to them about it, because it could be that you've torn your rotator cuff and you'll have to have surgery. And we were in the car when he told me that, and I just passed out, literally fainted, fell forward, and he had to kind of put his arm out and stop me from hitting the dashboard, and then awkwardly park in the car park of a closed a kind of shopping mall car park. And he was just like, what the hell happened? And I think it was just the combination of both the idea of having to have surgery and that there's being something wrong with my body, but also that would stop me doing the thing that I really felt I had to do. So that was maybe for him quite a pinpoint moment where he's like, I think this might be a problem now.
Why is exercise addiction a problem?
I mean, you can hurt yourself. That's the main issue. It's not necessarily good for your body. And like anything, you can take anything too far. I mean, moderation is always good, isn't it? That's what they say. I haven't quite mastered the whole moderation thing yet, but that's the goal.
And how does someone begin to make changes and to recover from exercise addiction?
I suppose it's trying to reframe exercise. So I definitely think nowadays, I think a lot more about things like hormones. So I'm definitely better if I have exercised regularly, even every day. But that actually a 15-minute row will make my moods easier, and so it's definitely good for me in that way. But I don't have to have done an hour, and I don't have to have done that and run, and I don't have to have done that and lifted a load of weights. I can just do the thing that's actually going to help me. And so I think it's linking it, and I'm not always keen on the phrase self-care because it sounds like a euphemism for more intimate practices, but linking it to that in sometimes in the past I've done things like I've done my short row, and then part of that workout being more exercise, it's been things like using a massage ball on my feet, and so then it feels like, well, there's something physical still happening. I'm aware that that's part of the process, but I'm not, it's not a kind of a punishment, I guess.
Emma, what inspired you to write Sweat, and how much of it is drawn from your own personal experience?
So I've been interested for a while in the idea of someone who's been in a stalking situation or a harassment situation, and then there would be some kind of power flip. So I kept going back to this idea, and I was especially interested in things about looking, and, you know, that feeling that it's kind of that you're being looked at all the time, and that is a way of someone controlling you. But also on the other side, how difficult it is for women to look at men with any kind of feeling of safety. Like, I think about the number of times, say on public transport, that I looked at someone, accidentally made eye contact, and then got followed through a station or along a street. So I always feel like that looking thing is such a dangerous moment for women. And so I was interested in that and looking at how I could flip that round. And then, because I wanted this power dynamic and I was trying to work out what kind of setting I could put it in, the idea of a personal trainer seemed ideal, because that's also this strange power dynamic. You know, you're paying your personal trainer, so in effect you're in control, but actually you're paying them to tell you what to do, so the power's kind of with them, and it switches even throughout a session, right? So I was interested in that, and I thought that would make it work, and so that's why my main character is a personal trainer and has been in a relationship with a personal trainer, so that they've constantly had this kind of dynamic. And the minute that I realised I wanted to do that, I think there's quite often a kind of instinct when you're writing that you're getting somewhere and you don't know why. And I'd been struggling to make the book work or find the plot or whatever. And then I realised that it was because it was going to be about exercise and all of those kinds of things that I'd experienced. So the kind of obsession with trying to hone my body down and down and down. And so a lot of those themes then came in, and it became something that was kind of easy to write. You know, suddenly all the emotions were obvious to me.
So when did exercise become a problem for you, and how would you describe to listeners what an issue or an exercise addiction looks like?
So I've always had a bit of a tricky relationship with feeling that exercise was something you couldn't leave alone. You know, it wasn't just that, you know, you should be fit and healthy, but it was a kind of a routine that I couldn't give up. I'd mostly managed it throughout my 20s. And then when I was 32, I had my daughter, and the birth was really bad. It was very dangerous, very long, very painful. It just felt, everything seemed to go wrong. And after that, I just felt disgusted by my body, because, you know, I had this reproductive system that had one job, and it couldn't do that with all this drama. And so I felt it was kind of disgusting even to be female, and the whole mothering process. And so I think that was kind of the moment when it kind of tipped the balance, and I started doing lots of fast days. I got really into 5-2, and then that became 4-3, and then from 500 calories I went down to maybe 350 calories, and then meanwhile I was rowing and a lot more. We got a new rowing machine, and I was obsessed with it, and then I was getting a lot of pain, so I started running on my rest days, and then I would just combine it and do every day, and it got to the point where I'd lost so much fat that my period stopped. And I remember going to the doctor and asking about it, and they were like, well, this is worrying, you know, you shouldn't, this is not good, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. And I just thought, this is great, because the issue that I had with myself was my reproductive system, and now I've beaten it. Like, now it's done, like I don't have to think about it anymore. So not bleeding seemed amazing, like that I had like achieved my goal. But you know, even when you're having those thoughts, you're aware that like that's not healthy. And that's when my husband got really worried, and was much more careful then about exactly what I was doing. And it makes you kind of into a liar as well, and then you're aware you're lying, you're telling people you've eaten more than you have, or you're hiding a workout that you've done early in the morning before other people get up. So that's then clear that it's not the right thing to be doing, because otherwise you wouldn't lie about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the deceit, and I relate to your problem so much, because I too, as listeners know, really struggle with exercise addiction and also with anorexia. And it's the deceit that eats you up. And I mean, I've had moments, my gosh, when I've snuck off in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. if it can fit in the exercise routine, and got, I mean, the number of floors and like public loos. I mean, honestly, like you will do anything to get your fix. And as you say, the extent to which your body suffers is, to you, it's just irrelevant. And actually, as a woman, when you've got an eating disorder and an exercise addiction, it's great. I haven't got my period. It's like, I don't have to, it's this whole thing now where we're becoming more aware of hormones and the importance of tapping into that cycle, and the fact that we are creatures that operate on a 28-day or 30, whatever day cycle. Mm-hmm. And actually we need to sort of rest at certain points in the luteal phase, etc. And suddenly not having a period, it's like, great, well, I can just go full throttle all the time. And you start to detach from that femininity, which is definitely a theme that I'm kind of curious about and sort of keen to explore a bit more.
Yeah, definitely there's something to do with that. And even when I got to a certain point, I was looking at like, how could I get a mastectomy, for instance, because then that would be the last barrier to feeling like I was, completely away from everything to do with motherhood, right? Like just, and anything to do with being female. And I remember having to have a smear test reminder came through, and I was like, oh God, like disgusting to even think that I would have a vagina, or I'd have a cervix you'd have to check. Like, it was an awful reminder. And that's a really weird thing as well, because then I also think that my hormones were all over the place, because sometimes you get this spike in testosterone when you've lost so much fat, and and so my sex drive was really high. So then that's a weird thing, that you think, well, you shouldn't feel, if you're not feeling feminine, what's that about? That you're quite happy to have sex, that's normal, that feels good, that feels like doesn't somehow feel like it's the wrong kind of femininity, I guess. But I think it was so much to do with the idea of the actual like birth and child rearing thing that I'd separated that off entirely. And I do think for me, some of the recovery was about my daughter getting older. And so once it wasn't such a physical role, like once breastfeeding was not on the table, not that I did it that long, but once that, even the suggestion of that was over, and it wasn't so much about, nappies and I don't know, all the kind of like the way that the children are kind of on you all the time, even when they're not actually breastfeeding. That sounds awful, because I love my daughter and I love cuddling her, but it's just that there's a difference between a child who's like maybe like 3 and a baby in the way that we physically react to them. And I think as she got a bit older, it was easier to feel like I had my body back in a different way. So I didn't have to struggle so hard to kind of make it into this hard thing. Like, I didn't want to be soft. I was so terrified of being soft.
What impact did it have on your marriage and on your ability to be a mother when you're in the throes of the exercise addiction?
I mean, my husband might disagree, but I don't think it really affected our marriage. I do feel guilty about some of the ways I held myself back during that time, and some of it's really minor, but still, it's easy to feel guilty. Like, for instance, I would not like to bake things. This is a big thing, and my sister-in-law would bake with my daughter, and it would look so fun, and they'd eat the cupcakes they'd made, and I just was like, not for me, don't want to get involved. So things like that. And also, although I felt better in lots of ways because I felt I had loads of energy, like I can run anytime, and I would run around with my daughter, there's also that feeling like, I would be in pain afterward running because I'd really already got to my limit that day. And so doing anything more is kind of, I was already aware that I'd like depleted my resources. So I would say those were the main issues.
I think when you're in the early stages of an exercise addiction, it's just that concept of more is better. The more I can do, the better. But then, I mean, based on my personal experience, it then gets to the point where you have to reach that threshold every day. And if you don't, then the panic starts to rise, and you then start to feel like you failed. And so then it becomes a game with yourself. It's that you've got to reach that target or exceed the target. And I think that then becomes a mental prison, because you're constantly on edge until you've done this routine, which for me, it's taken up to 7-8 hours a day. And so suddenly, like, I haven't got a day at all. And the whole day, from the moment I wake up until this routine's over, it's like I can't start my day. And it's that inner whirring anxiety that just doesn't pass. Did you experience that?
Yeah, definitely that I would like disappear for swathes of the day. And I'm really lucky that my husband was able to step in and look after our daughter. But it felt like, that, I would either be shutting myself away up with like weights and our rowing machine, or I'd be out of the house running. And it definitely felt like I was taking tons and tons of time away from them both. And this thing about it being a game, like I really recognize that it's that you have to tick off these things in order to have had a successful day, right? And then if you feel like you're slipping, it's such an immediate spiral. And I think there are certain things like, for instance, like the kind of watches that tell you what you did better yesterday, why you're not doing, all that kind of stuff. I think that really doesn't help, because it's so easy to be reminded by technology and think, oh yeah, no, that yesterday I beat this goal, why am I not doing it? So that I really recognize that it's this feeling of like you've got a threshold and then you just you can't ever drop it. It's like that game you play when it's like throwing to each other, see how many times you can throw it around the room or whatever, and you have to beat it every time, otherwise it's like the game is totally lost.
And as you said, it's that sense of completion, and if you don't have that sense of completion, it's like this whirring anxiety in the pit of one's stomach, and it's like, I've just got to finish, because then I'll feel better. But if the bar's always being raised, that's the problem. And I think until you reach that realization where it's like, okay, this is what's going on. And actually, as you said earlier, it's about recognizing you can just scratch the itch. You don't have to take the scab off every time. You can just do 15 minutes of rowing instead of an hour of rowing, and an hour of cycling, and an hour of running, because your life just slowly feels like it's getting out of control.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so easy to say, because I'm like, la la la, I just do 15 minutes. And then I know that actually yesterday I was meant to do 15 minutes and I did half an hour. So it's not like it's like, oh, I've solved it. But it's knowing that that's okay, and that's maybe the goal is like a lower goal. The point is to maybe stop while you're still feeling really fresh, rather than just allowing it to, it's that thing of feeling like you're in control, and then once this exercise starts, actually you realise that you're not. So I don't know, it's very difficult to find the sweet spot.
When did that realisation happen? Because I think in the early days, one's in total denial, and it's just like, more, I want more. And then there's this realisation that actually this is an issue and I need to start addressing it.
I don't know. And I think I still feel a little bit like, and I think this is one of those things about anything along these lines, that you can say all the right things, be like, yeah, no, I've realised that this is wrong. And in the back of my head, I'm like, no, but it would be better to do a bit more, wouldn't it?
I know, it's so hard. And also, particularly in gyms and working out in public areas where you get recognition and people say, oh, what are you training for? Oh, you're so strong, or you're really athletic. And then it ignites that voice in your head that says, oh, well, what I'm doing is right. What I'm doing is clearly right. And until you get injured, which happens to me like clockwork, I mean, honestly, and you're forced to stop, or there's an external force of someone else, and there's no access to exercise equipment or to do anything. You just have to sit there and just cope with the feeling of discomfort. But it's really hard, because also everything that we're fed from the media, everything you listen to, move more, eat less, move more.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the messaging is for the vast majority, right? So it's like anything where, we mostly have a bigger crisis about obesity and about people not moving and about the, all the problems that come with that we know about. And so the difficulty is, how do you do messaging for a smaller minority of people for whom that messaging is really damaging? And I just don't think I have an answer for that, because if the big crisis is to get people to move, that message is always going to be a priority over the people who see that and, take it too far. So it's very difficult. Like in the book, the antagonist called Liam, I was trying to work out how I could get into his mindset. And I didn't really know why you would be coercive to your partner. It doesn't really make sense to me. And so I was trying to work out what his psychology would be. And so I gave myself a really hard rule, and it was that he couldn't do anything to the protagonist, Cassie, unless he really could justify it as being good for her. So everything, although he is coercive and abusive, everything he does is to make her fitter, to make her like healthier. You know, it's all to make her like running time lower and her heart rate lower and her muscles bigger, and you know, he has an answer for it all. And in a way, all I was doing was using the voice that was inside me as his voice. It was just that constant, you know, punishing voice that says you haven't done enough, that I just used that as his voice, and that was enough to get me into the psychology of it. And I think in a way that is reflected all around us. Like we hear messages all the time about moving more. You know, the problem is if someone says to you, you know, you really should get your steps up and you're on 4,000 steps, that's a reasonable message. But if you're already on 30,000 steps, it's kind of not helpful.
I know that's what I keep trying to say to myself, is my threshold is unrealistic and is way in excess of what most people's is. So when I have a day and I'm like, oh God, I really didn't like push it today. It's like, it felt like a really mediocre workout. It's like 50%. Like, but Pandora, remind yourself, that's most people's 150%, you know?
Yeah.
And actually being able to just reframe your thinking and to answer back to that inner critic that's constantly pushing you to do more and more and more. And as you say, as we tap into that more nurturing side, it's actually really important. I mean, what I say to myself now is, well, I've got tomorrow. Actually, you know, I want to be, it's not my ability to do more, it's my ability to recover, because I want to be able to do this tomorrow, and I want to be able to do it, you know, in a month's time. And I know now from like having 8 stress fractures that the cycle will just repeat itself if I continue to do the same thing. And as we know, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. But it's taken me, you know, 22 years to get to this stage. So it's a very frustratingly slow process.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think this, again, it comes back to this thing of like all the things we hear. You know, like I was thinking the other day, like what could the gym do, for instance? I just wish they would just put one sign up that was like, have you taken a rest day? Like just to remind you that that's actually required, not just like a suggestion, but that's a requirement. That would be really nice. Because it's just, yeah, it's trying to make that normal as part of the building process, that it's not you skipping a day. It's not like you indulging. That's what you need to make the workout meaningful, right?
Well, to make the adaptations, the muscle adaptation, you know, rest is when you do get stronger. And I have fought with this for years. And I still find it hard when I'm alone to give myself permission to have a rest day. But now, you know, I have a rule that like on a Sunday, I try and have a rest day. But, you know, it's really, really hard because there's that itch, and we know that you get that endorphin release. And it is, although per se it's not, you know, a substance addiction, we're addicted to the chemicals that get released in the brain. You know, it's the dopamine, it's the endorphins. And it's also running away from the feeling of like the feelings.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's something. Do you recognize in yourself that you're running away from something, and have you addressed those feelings?
A little bit, I think. I definitely know that I'm putting things off, right? So, you know, like you say about doing 8 hours and then you'll start your day. There's definitely that feeling that while you're exercising, nothing can touch you, you know. Well, I can't answer those emails that I'm feeling awkward about, or get stuck into the next book project, or do the edits that I haven't quite worked out how to actually make them work, or while I'm exercising, all of that falls away. I mean, I guess that is very much like how alcoholics talk about drinking, right? That it sort of stops everything, and it gives you a little bubble, and then it just the problem is that it just means that all the work you've put off is now condensed into like half an hour of your day, which is not exactly less stressful. So I feel like all of those kind of internal barriers are kind of like breached through exercise. And then I don't know if I can say it's like I know what it is I'm running from, except a general anxiety. I probably, maybe I need to do some work on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of it stems from, I mean, for me, again, like I have to always base it on my experience because I don't want to impose that on you, but I think a lot of it is never feeling loved or enough. And I think therefore the exercise gave me something. It gave me a sense of achievement. It gave me a sense of belonging. It gave me a sense of purpose. And I think when I was a little girl, running was, I mean, it sounds ironic, but it was running away. It was running away from my feelings. Like they were too painful to bear. And running was something that I had. It was my friend. It was reliable. I knew I could do it. I knew I could go on and on and on. And like you say, and even at that age, it was putting off life. And I had very bad OCD at the same time. And it was almost like the only time that my head just quietened down. But it's interesting because I spend a lot of time thinking about my thoughts and being a sort of outside observer to what's going on in my head. And when I'm exercising, I often have to have, a dialogue between the two sort of different voices. And there's the more, push, complete. And then there's the, why are we doing this? And there's the curiosity that's now come in now. And that's it's quite a recent phenomenon, but it's happened in the last couple of years. And it gets to a point now where I know I've done enough. But I still, like you, I will carry on going. But I know that, okay, Panda, in your rational mind, you now know that you've done a sufficient workout. And then I get a slight element of self-hatred because I'm like, we're still giving into it. And then I leave feeling a bit deflated. And if I go beyond that sort of upper threshold, I really start to feel like, what are we doing? You're just like, literally, it's a form of self-flagellation. And I think it's getting to I really hope in a few years' time I get to the point where I now know I have to have a routine prescribed to me by a specialist because I can't trust myself to do my own like logical exercise program. And like you, do I always follow it? No. But I'm now getting much better at, accepting that someone else needs to program for me. And being accountable is another really big thing. But it's the shame. And I think because it's such a misunderstood condition, I remember when friends used to say to me, come on, you just got to set yourself an hour and that's it, in and out of the gym in an hour. And the same with my parents, everyone getting so angry and frustrated. And I, again, that would just reinforce the feeling of self-hatred because I couldn't be honest. And like you say, but the deceit, that really ate me up. And I'd be like, oh no, I've only been to the gym for an hour. And then I would hear people be like, oh, I've been to the gym today. God, I had a really intense workout. And then I went on a walk. And I'm there sort of downplaying absolutely everything. And all my friends can attest to it. It's just, and then you feel like a liar. And then people pick you up on it. And then you sort of start to feel even worse. So how could people have helped? Do you think anyone could have helped? Or how can people at this stage in your life help or do anything that is remotely supportive?
I don't know. I don't take instruction well, so I find it much. It kind of has to come from me. I'm much more likely to, deliberately sneak in more exercise or say I've eaten more than I have if I feel like I'm being monitored. Which isn't a very nice part of my personality, but so I think that's very difficult, and it kind of has to be something that you slowly work on, and that, like you say, you have to have that internal conversation. I think that makes sense. It's difficult as well because if you say to people, I just can't stop exercising, they're like, oh, I wish I could be like that, and it sounds like you're boasting, and there is a little bit of pride in it, right? Like that's the difficulty as well, is that there is a bit of pride in it. So it isn't as straightforward as just like, I'm doing this and I hate it, or I'm doing this and I love it. Kind of either way, there is a little bit of like, I'm doing something that you're not doing, or I'm not eating the things that you're eating. And so there is a kind of weird sort of narcissism in it as well, that I'm aware of. But then it's also difficult because, you then speak to people who, like, I remember once taking my husband for a run when my in-laws were looking after our daughter, and they looked at me like I was trying to, like, murder my husband by taking him on a run. Like, what are you doing? Because that kind of exercise isn't part of their life. So then that's difficult, isn't it? Because it's this moderation thing. Like, everybody should do some exercise. It genuinely is good for us. But who's to say where the limit is? And it's about who you trust, I guess. And I can totally imagine having someone tell you exactly what you need to do. I can see how that would be a relief, that it's then not your responsibility. But I don't know if I could listen to someone else tell me. I don't think I'm wired that way. But the OCD thing, that completely rang true for me as well. And I think a lot of probably what my issue is about control in general. Like, that's what makes life seem less chaotic, right? If I've done this exercise, I've done this exercise, and I've eaten this thing, and also I've usually got other things on that list, like I've written so many words, and even at one point it was like, I've written so many words, I have like done this game with my daughter, I've like read this amount of a book, I've like, whatever it is, I've had sex. That was like one of the, not because I didn't like it, but because I felt like that would make me a successful person. These are all the things that you're supposed to do to be like a real human, who's like got their life in control. That I think that's probably where a lot of it's coming from. And it's very difficult then, if you stop, not to immediately feel out of control again, because what are you doing with this unit of time, or how does your routine work if you're not fitting all these different things in and ticking them off in your brain?
And I remember when I told one, I echo your sentiment entirely, but I remember telling one therapist this, and she just turned around to me and she just said, Pandora, you're not in control at all. You are so out of control, because you can't tap into any of your intuition or what you actually feel like doing. I mean, if I said I had to do this huge long list of things every day, would that imply that I'm in control? No, because I'm just creating all this stuff that I have to get through to create an illusion of control. And it is, and I think that's the problem. And that's something where I'm really trying to educate myself, and I try constantly like listen to podcasts, read like positive messaging around things like rest, the importance of balancing like an exercise routine, the importance of refueling, the importance of carbohydrate and nutrition, the importance of not fasting as a woman, as you say, the importance of looking after our hormonal health, like all these markers of health. Because I think for so long I have absorbed this message that health meant over-exercise and under-eating. And as you so rightly say, it's this, for me, I wouldn't necessarily use the word narcissist streak, because obviously I don't like to sort of label myself as a narcissist, but there is an element of like virtuosity attached to it. It's like, I'm holier than thou. It's almost like this sort of, religiosity that we sort of think of ourselves as being better than. And it is. It's like you see someone eating a cupcake and you're like, oh, well, I don't eat that crap. My body's a temple. But then there's also, I remember at my worst times, I would like stand outside like a sandwich shop and I would look at these slim girls eating a sandwich and think, I'm just so envious. Like, how do you do that? That's just like a foreign language to me. I just don't understand how you can go into a shop and buy a sandwich and just sit there and give yourself permission to eat it.
Yeah, I remember once going through Waterloo Station and thinking like, look at all these stores, like the pasty place and the places doing the baguettes and everywhere, and just thinking like, all these people are buying these things and eating them, and they're fine with that. Like, why does that seem so appalling to me? Like, virtuosity much better than narcissism. I totally agree. And I also really like the idea of it being about intuition. And one of my therapists said that I try and plan too much, and that she was like, why can't you play more? Like, experiment, see what it's like, see what you actually like, see what happens if you do this or you don't do this, and be curious about it, rather than always feeling like, here's the plan and then I must stick to it, otherwise something terrible will happen, that I will fall completely off the wagon in some way that it will be disastrous. And I have thought about that a lot. I made everything in my life into something that was a job. So I used to really like gardening, and I just felt like I failed at it over and over again. And a lot of gardening is kind of planning up to a point, and it became this overwhelming thing. And then that's my my therapist was like, why don't you just buy a plant you like and put it in your garden rather than, making lists and working out, when things bloom and what they will look like in the autumn and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. And it looked terrible, looked really awful. My garden this year was full of teasels, which I thought would be amazing and actually were not. But actually there was some amazing joys about that. The fact that it was like, this didn't work, but that was fun. And also there were things I didn't expect, like this autumn we've had so many goldfinches in our garden because of these teasels, which we would never have had before. So it's trying to remind myself that good things can happen if you let go, and that can be really fun. And I like new experiences that I'm not expecting, that is good. And actually if you plan everything and you've sewn your day up, none of that can happen. So yeah, I really like that, trying to work with your intuition. That seems really sensible.
I think you say, as you say, so, I mean, yeah, accurately, that it is this notion that there's no room for spontaneity and even creativity, really, if we zip our days up. And it depresses me now. Before it was this feeling that, okay, well, I've ticked all the boxes, that's okay, so tomorrow we go again, phew. And now it's like, well, actually, no, I didn't let go. And it's, I often talk about the kind of glimmers of light, and it's the glimmers of light that appear when I create space in my day and I create room for nothingness, or I bump into someone in the street and I have a conversation that was unexpected, or, my routine does become a bit like a prison. So I think my goal is I get that routine into a sensible time frame, and then life can happen, because I know that I'm putting life on hold with ticking all these boxes. And I love that notion of it. It's like almost embracing the mess. And I think it's very hard with our bodies, especially as women, because we do like to be, any woman, regardless of whether they've been diagnosed with an eating disorder or not, everyone likes to look a certain way, or to, it might not be the same way, but they like to feel that, they're in control of their bodies to a degree. I think most women now are aware of what they eat. I mean, I don't think that it doesn't necessarily have to influence what they eat, but I think most now are aware. We kind of know what is ultra processed, what is whole food. I think generally women do care about their appearance. I think it's very hard to escape in this day and age.
Well, we're much more educated about food in general than, like, say, our parents, right? Like, immediately. And then the information is out there. So it doesn't take very much to find the information you want. And then on top of that, people are giving you that information whether you want it or not, right? So it's, you go on Instagram and you're not looking for anything to do with food, but then here are 5 people giving you the best recipes for building muscle or whatever. And so it's very easy to, follow that. And I think, I don't know many people who aren't aware of what they should be doing, even if they're not doing it. And then that's its own prison, right? Because people end up feeling all kinds of self-loathing because they're not exercising when they feel they should be. So it's all a spectrum of, like, misery. So I think this thing of trying to, embrace this messiness of life is really the only way to go. But it's also probably the hardest. I mean, I really think moderation is more or less impossible. There are only a few people I know who seem to be able to, it's things like leaving some food on your plate. I can't do that. I can not eat, or I can eat. I can't do this kind of casual, there's like maybe 5 bites left. I don't understand how that does it. So I think there's a kind of that's, I guess, a kind of metaphor for everything, because we're always looking for this easy fix, right? Like there's so many pieces of advice that we get, and it's like, follow one rule, or eat this one thing, or do this one extra exercise, and it promises something that isn't real. And the problem is that if you're on one end of the spectrum, it does nothing. And if you're on the other end of the spectrum, it just adds to the number of things that you're already saying, if I just do this one extra thing. So, it ends up hurting everyone.
And I think it's that thing of always searching for that feeling of it's just right. It's got to be right. And there's this delineation between right and wrong. And in truth, like, we create a concept of what is right and what is wrong, because it is all subjective. What I see as right, you might see as wrong, and what you see as wrong, I might see as right. So I think it's reframing those beliefs, and it's constantly just questioning, okay, is what I'm doing coming from a good place, or is it coming from actually that sort of inner drive? Am I running away? Is this a form of self-flagellation? Am I being overly controlling? And the trouble is, when you ignite that voice, the behaviors then become all the more painful. And I'm hoping that over time, you then actually start to execute the behaviors, and then the sort of voice slowly gets quieter. And, you know, it goes back to this intuition thing. How am I feeling today? Because sometimes I lie in bed in the morning, and I don't know about you, but I'm absolutely exhausted. And I'm just, the last thing I feel like is getting up and doing my workout. Like, literally, I just want to lie here and I want another 2 hours of sleep. But then it's that fine balance, isn't it? Because it's that I get up and I go, and I can feel awful for the first half of my workout, and then actually I can start to feel quite positive. Other days I can feel awful and I remain feeling awful. And then other days I'm like, oh, I've actually got quite a lot of energy and spark today. This is going well. And sometimes, yeah, when you're having those days where it feels like trudging through mud and your mood's low, it's just being able to actually give yourself permission to just be a bit kinder, and being like, okay, I'm just going to do some stretching, and like, that's okay for today, because tomorrow I'll get back to it. But I think with exercise addiction, it's that regardless of how I feel, no, got to get through it. If I'm injured, if I'm in pain, no, just got to get through it.
In fact, almost more so, because the days you don't want to do it are the days where it's like, well, see, like, you're not working hard enough. Like, if you're doing this properly, if you were like really a fit person, you wouldn't feel like this. You'd be joyous every moment. So then that's a kind of another way to beat yourself up, because just the fact that you haven't jumped out of bed to do it. Yeah, I think that's it. It's really, it's just hard to know how to like get that kindness to yourself, like you say. And I think sometimes when you're on the journey, that kindness can come in, because it's that feeling of like, well, I'm doing, you know, this is a process. I'm doing this workout, I've done this workout, so whatever I look like now, it's fine, it's a process, and that can be good. But that kind of feeling of hope can be crushed so fast, because there's this feeling like you're being a fraud in some way. Like, I often feel a bit of a fraud about it, that I think like, you know, because I'm not like an Olympic athlete, then I'm obviously not fit enough, or or because I didn't want to exercise that day, that makes me a fraud. Yeah.
Do you ever think, I always get this thought, I'm like, God, I wish I had been an Olympic athlete, because then at least I'll get paid to do this, or I would get something out of it. I'm like, I waste all these hours doing something for what? For nothing. I'm like, meanwhile, you know, other people are making their fortunes, and I'm just like sort of wasting my time, sort of getting fitter for what end?
Oh God, I'd never thought that. I've never wanted, I don't know. That's actually very practical, and I really like that. But no, I just always, I mean, as I said, I take instruction very poorly, so I don't think I would have been a good athlete.
No, I do too. I would have been hopeless. Plus, like, having an eating disorder, I don't think is kind of the ideal combination. But even so, like, I
love that you're thinking like that. I mean, like, I should really be paid to do this.
My head is literally like, we'll go off in any direction. Do you think family members, I mean, can your husband ever help? I mean, will you ever be vulnerable to family members or friends and just say, can you help me have my rest day? Because I really struggle with it. And what can they do that does help?
So this seems a bit counterintuitive, but my husband got me to join his gym. And so we probably go to the gym. He goes very regularly. Like, he also needs to be told to take a rest day, but he also eats a lot, so it's fine. But he will come with me 2 or 3 times a week, and workouts are different when you're with someone that you enjoy being with, and so we laugh a lot. Sometimes we'll get, you know, you get to a set and you think like, I really don't want to do this, and if I was on my own, I'd be like, right, keep going, like, how dare you even think about it. But if I say it out loud, oh, I don't think I can do another set. He's like, yep, come on, let's do something else then, or let's go home, or let's pick up something from the shops. And because he's so normal about it, he's just like, oh, we'll just stop. I'm like, oh, okay, we'll just stop. So yeah, I think that does help, but it's not him telling me to stop. I think that I would then be like, absolutely not, how dare you? But because it's just, he just normalizes the moment that I feel like I have that intuition, okay, I think I'm done. he's there to say, yeah, that's normal.
I'm curious, you explore quite a lot of toxic relationships, obviously, in Sweat. Was it based on any toxic relationship that you've ever had in the past?
Not a romantic one, but I have talked about a coercive relationship with my therapist, and that helped me to kind of understand how it might be. You know, the person that I had this difficult relationship with is not someone I'm frightened of. They're not physically threatening. But all the kind of feelings that come up in that kind of relationship where, you know, you want to get everything right. Like, as long as I've got the right food and planned the right activity and not forgotten anything and got my timings right and okayed it with them, but also taken the lead and done all the right things, then we'll have a day that's okay, and that they'll be even-tempered and we'll get through it and it'll be fine and maybe even good. And it's such a trap, because obviously it never works out, and then the one time something goes wrong, it all blows up in your face. And in a way, that's so exactly what it feels like when you're exercising. You know, as long as I do this and I do this and I do this and I do this, and then something goes wrong and it's worse. So that a lot of the feelings in the book about trying to follow instructions and do everything correctly is to do with that relationship. And knowing how it feels to be so desperate to get everything right, to keep the peace, I guess. But I was never in a romantic relationship like that.
How do you think gyms and fitness communities and other people can help and support those who are over-exercising?
I mean, I think emphasising rest days is just very useful and true as well. So it's not something you're asking anyone to recommend that's not good for everyone. And I think maybe to always look at competition as a fun thing rather than, you know, I think sometimes there's this kind of prove yourself mentality, and I think that can be very difficult to ignore, especially if you feel vulnerable. But I think it's very hard to know what people can do practically. I mean, the problem is, like you were saying about you have to take your own experiences. I just know from my own experience how badly I take any, not necessarily criticism, but input, you know, and that it's so hard to know what message gets through. But yeah, I think lightness is always good, taking everything with lightness, and the more that can be encouraged, the more that gyms can be about people exploring the equipment and having fun and trying new things, and also variety, because the more variety of exercise you do, the less likely you are to injure yourself or get obsessed with that one exercise. You can't constantly beat yourself on something if it's totally new. So I think that is always useful too.
And where would you like to see yourself if you could look back in 5 years' time? What would you like to see?
I hope that it won't be this constant conversation in my head. I hope it will be a quieter space, and that there'll be more space for the things that are more important. Because I do still feel that there's this battle all the time. You know, there's always, it's like a kind of Reddit forum of like back and forth. And so it would be nice to think that that's quietened down a bit.
Emma, thank you so much. It's been such a lovely, candid conversation, and good luck.
Thank you.
I
and to
literally.
you too. Thank you very much. It was really fun.